my name is Rick Bailey. I'm Head of Tsunami Warning and Ocean Services at the Bureau of Meteorology. And I've also been heading up some international efforts to build a tsunami warning system for the Indian Ocean. Next slide, please. What I want to talk about is also the Indian Ocean tsunami on this eventful day, 26th of December 2004. It changed millions of lives. It changed my life. Next slide, please. I'd like you to all think back what was happening on that day. Boxing Day, as we call it, but of course that's not recognised as a holiday around the region. You might have been at the cricket. Australia were playing Pakistan, and our wonderful days at top of the world, Ricky Pontings and Shane Warnes, etc. You might have been watching the Sydney to Hobart, Nicorette winning. You might have been having a lovely holiday on a beach in Thailand or Malaysia or Sri Lanka. Or you might have been like me. We were playing cricket, unfortunately not at the MCG, but the family was at our beach house on the Victorian coast. Next slide, please. But this is what happened. Mother Nature unleashed the third most powerful earthquake recorded from a point north of Sumatra in Indonesia. It unzipped across a length of about 1,200 kilometres in 6 minutes from there northwards. It lifted the seabed by up to between 5 and 10 metres. The power of that released at the Earth's surface was equivalent to 1,500 atomic bombs. The power in the tsunami was equivalent to all the explosives in World War II, including the 2 atomic bombs. That tsunami, as you saw from the video, spread across the Indian Ocean at the speed of 900 kilometres per hour. So it literally took hours, 8 hours, to cross from one side to the other. It took minutes to devastate the town of Banda Aceh on the northernmost point of Indonesia. Almost impossible for any technical warning system to warn against. And this is where we heard from the inner lessons that we learn from tsunamis. In those sorts of situations, it's nature's signs that are going to help you the most. But the tsunami reached and devastated places in India. It got far across to Somalia. Next slide, please. These are sort of the graphic images, the horrible images really, but just shows you the power, that middle one. The power of these waves, not even the large 10, 20 metre waves, but the smaller waves, 2 to 4 metres. They have 200 kilometres of water piled up behind them. It's a surge. The power to push railway trains off their tracks, lift boats up on top of houses. Just absolute destruction. Next slide, please. These are some of the worst devastated countries due to the tsunami. There are over 200,000 people lost their lives that day. Over 1 million people were displaced and homeless. Thousands still missing. We just don't know their fate. One little girl I hear 7 years later, she'd been washed down the coast and grew up in another family, and she remembered her grandmother's name. And she issued that and eventually got reunited with the family. They thought she'd gone. But again, this is the kind of devastation that you could see around the region. In Somalia, about order of 100 people died, but fishing villages wiped out, livelihoods. The effects were just so widespread. Next slide, please. This is a picture of a coastal area near Banda Aceh, one of the worst areas. Again, close to where the epicentre of the tsunami was, impacted by 10 to 20 metre waves coming in. You can see the picture before and the after picture. Everything is devastated, wiped out. Next slide, please. This is a trip that I had to Banda Aceh a few years afterwards. That picture in the top left there, that was all underwater during the tsunami. Up in the top right there, that's a ceremonial at one of 4 mass graves of 40,000 people buried in each. They had to bury them. The risk of infection was so high. That picture in the middle, that was actually an offshore power station. It now permanently sits about 3 kilometres inland. That's how far it got taken. But the reconstruction has been happening. The picture down the middle, there's a museum. But Banda Aceh, the police there, when we were there, we had 600 police and soldiers looking after us because of all of the problems they've had with political strife, with terrorist training up in the hills, etc. That's just one more disaster for them. Next slide, please. But look, as we know, out of adversity often comes goodwill, and in this particular case, international collaboration to help build a warning system for the Indian Ocean. There wasn't one at 2004. In the Pacific there was. Tsunamis are much more frequent there. Thankfully not that frequent, but as we've seen in Japan, they're still devastating there too. The worst one was from Chile in 1960. But 28 countries, under the auspices of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, of UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation, we've all got together. We've put our political differences aside and working to build this system. Next slide, please. Immediately after the tsunami of 2004, the United States and Japan quickly helped us to establish an Interim Advisory Service where they took the efforts and knowledge of the Pacific Ocean and quickly put it in place for the Indian Ocean. Now, and this is while all the 28 countries around the Indian Ocean, including Australia, developed our own capabilities to detect and warn against tsunamis. Back then, we actually had an tsunami alert system, very basic. We heard that there was a large earthquake. We didn't know what was coming, how big, when. We did manage to warn at least some industries and close down some industries on the west coast of Australia. But we didn't know what was coming then. It was almost impossible to know what was happening. Some people, it pales into insignificance, but about 35 people were washed out to sea on Australian coasts over there due to rip currents and had to be rescued. As I said, that paled into insignificance compared to what was happening in the rest of the ocean. But now, through the efforts of Australia, India and Indonesia, we've put together our own capability, a world-leading technical capability for the Indian Ocean, where we provide threat information to national tsunami warning centres that have been set up in all of the countries around the basin. So we've set up seismic networks, we have tide gauges measuring sea levels on the coast, we have deep ocean buoys moored in 6 kilometres of water, no mean effort to do, providing in information for 24/7 where we're monitoring these activities. Like I said, we don't have long. We really do not have long, and the technical system is limited. You must understand that. When a tsunami is going to arrive in 5 or 10 minutes, if you're close to it, the best thing you're going to feel is an earthquake. Go to higher ground, at least 10 metres, or go inland as soon as you can. Next slide, please. But the technical warning system is not the end of the story. Far from it. We must also work, and we've been working on community preparedness, whether it's community education, training tsunami warning centre staff, what to do when you've only got 20, 30 minutes to come up with an analysis of what type of warnings you should put out. Working with communities, evacuation maps. If one happens, where are you going to go? Putting signposts up, particularly in high-risk areas. Which direction should you go? Help people. Working with emergency services, putting up sirens. Next slide, please. But most importantly of all, still comes down to community education. These types of forums, what we're here for, telling people what to do. We can have all the high-tech systems in the world, but the communities have to know what to do, how to realise those signs, to get into that fight or flight activity more soon. And it's hard for tsunamis. Thankfully, we don't have them very often, so to keep that consciousness in the communities about what a tsunami is and what I should do when you've only got minutes, you've got to have that instant recall. So things like listening to Kamina's stories, listening to Matilda, that girl in the middle there, Tilly Smith, she'd learnt about tsunamis in school 2 weeks before her holiday. She recognised the signs, screamed at her mother, we've got to do something, and 100 people were rescued off the beach there because of the knowledge that she'd gained. So I guess just to finish off for me here, and as to everybody that's come to this forum and learnt something about it, just help spread that education. It's just vital for all of us. Thank you.